There we go.
Okay, thank you. I am going to share my screen, so hopefully everyone should see the presentation now. So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm Milena Brookshire, and I'm honored to be here with you for today's workshop, Leading Through Reform, Strategies to Engage Complex Teams. Let me start with a story that brings innovation to life at a very human level. Just before the pandemic, I was serving as board chair for Arts on the Horizon, a professional nonprofit theater company that creates immersive performances in theater arts education for children ages 0 to 6. And this is a very unique organization because most theater companies don't focus solely on younger children. So at the time, Arts on the Horizon was a new organization, and through dedication and perseverance and a wildly impactful mission of bringing accessible arts to the youngest audiences, we were nationally recognized for our growth and our impact. We were nominated for an award for Outstanding Emerging Theater Company. The Virginia Commission for the Arts awarded us a 50 for 50 Arts Inspiration Award in the category of Emerging Arts Organization. 3 of our productions have been nominated for Helen Hayes Awards in the Outstanding Production Theater for Young Audiences category. And this is a very hard thing to do, especially for theater focused on young children. So as you can imagine, our entire model was based on in-person interaction. So when everything shut down, we were faced with a massive problem. How do you safely bring children and families together to enjoy theater without a physical theater space to safely bring them to? We needed to innovate and fast. And believe me when I say, with a board of directors that included a finance executive, that's me, media experts, actors and other artists, and community activists, we all had very different ideas about how to tackle this problem. And as the board chair at the time, I had to bring this very complex and diverse team together to do just that. So instead of going dark, like many theaters did at that time, we got to work. We reached out to our community of artists, educators, and parents. We conducted polls and surveys. To sustain our donor base, which was a keen focus of mine, we held outdoor fundraisers like 5Ks and festivals. We tried new things. Well, new things at that time, which were Zoom performances. We had virtual bedtime stories. We had live streams on YouTube with our most popular performance characters. We even hosted drive-in theater shows where families could enjoy performances from their cars. It wasn't perfect, but it was creative, it was joyful, and it was impactful. We kept our mission alive at a time when many arts organizations were struggling just to survive. And what I learned in that moment was this: innovation doesn't always look like high-tech tools or giant breakthroughs, which is a lot of what I'm used to in my career. Sometimes it looks like a puppet show in a parking lot that brings a smile to a child's face. So whether I'm using my expertise in innovation and turnarounds to lead a nonprofit through artistic pivots or a federal agency through transformation, the lesson is the same. Innovation is a mindset, and it requires pulling people and sometimes machines, and I'll come back to that, together to make things happen. So allow me to first ground us in the current reality. Many of us are navigating organizations under pressure to innovate, whether through automation, AI, or digital transformation. And we're expected to do it with leaner teams, tighter budgets, and faster timelines. But here's the thing: complex teams just aren't cross-functional anymore. Giving this presentation 5 years ago, I would have focused a lot on bringing teams together that have various functions. Well, today, complex teams now include AI agents, machine learning tools, and autonomous systems making decisions alongside our humans. We may be the last generation of leaders to manage fully human teams, and many of us here today already are not. So today's conversation, though, will be rooted in human-centered leadership, also AI aware, because no matter how advanced our tools become, it will always be important to take human insight, human emotional intelligence, and our own influence to build trust, momentum, and alignment, and to move innovation from ambition to action. So the strategies we'll explore today are designed to help you lead in high stakes environments, both where people and tech are part of the team. Let me share a little bit about my own journey. The introduction was very nice, but I'm going to sort of center in on a few things as to what I'm bringing to this conversation that will help us as we talk through some of these strategies. I prefer organizations that are looking to turn around under complex and challenging circumstances. I also enjoy startups that are hungry for fresh ideas. So over the past 2 decades, I've built my career on architecting and implementing enterprise solutions and improvements, some large, some have been incremental. I've led reform teams at various federal agencies, including a cabinet level agency, an independent financial regulator, and a wholly owned government corporation. I've also held board leadership positions for nonprofits, as I described earlier. I've introduced principles across decentralized program offices, and I've led tens of millions of dollars in financial reform efforts, coordinating across IT, policy, legal, and operations. I've navigated plenty of organizations, as one of I described before, through global pandemic, designing and implementing strategies to continue reaching and engaging members, as I was able to drive significant growth at both organizations. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, I've had tremendous wins and I've also had some failures. And so far, I've learned something really significant. Successful innovation is never just about the best ideas, the seamless tech or tools. It's about people, it's about trust and leadership clarity. And increasingly, it's about how we integrate our human teams with intelligent systems and workflows. So today we'll talk about leading people through innovation with intentionality, clarity, and momentum. So before we dive in, I just want you to take a moment to reflect how innovation feels in your organization right now. One word, just drop it in the chat. We'll come back to it later. But I do want to understand sort of what we're feeling now as we think about innovation and what we're all experiencing. So let's talk first about building buy-in. In theory, if we present a good case, people should get on board. I've fallen victim to this principle many times, naturally because my background is math and economics, so logic wins for me every time. But in practice, the best ideas rarely win because they're logical. They win because they're moving, because people feel part of them. And more times than not, momentum beats merit. That's why building buy-in starts before the rollout, right? We map it, we build the wave to assess who has the voice, who has the energy, and where the hesitations are to shape the path of change. In a previous role, I had to drive adoption of a new financial reporting process across multiple program offices who were used to doing things their own way. The data made sense. The program itself was very logical and smooth. The policy that we were building also made sense. But what actually moved the change forward wasn't all of that. It wasn't the logic. It was getting key champions in the room, naming the concerns that they had out loud, and inviting some of the skeptics to help with the early co-design. So One thing I offer here is an influence map. And I'll say right away, I'm going to go through several frameworks throughout the workshop. I have rarely walked into a room of colleagues or executives and said, we are going to implement X framework. That's just not how that works. But I'm providing you with some structured framework so that you might be able to take from these things what will work in your organization, the same as I do. So this influence map here should include your champions. It should include the blockers, the skeptics, and the translators. And in today's landscape, it should also include AI systems or tools that shape how people prioritize, process, and decide. Key elements of your map should include your stakeholders. These are the individuals or groups or organizations that can affect or be affected by a project or a decision. It should include influence, the power or capacity to affect actions and behavior and opinions of others. Strength of influence. Sometimes that might look like a larger circle for those stakeholders that have more influence. Direction of influence, so that you can see who impacts the other and how influence flows. You might also show this by the difference in the thickness of lines that are flowing from influence to influence. So imagine a project where you're launching a new product, completely hypothetical. A large circle might represent the CEO, indicating a high level of influence. Arrows from the CEO, the marketing team, product development, showing how they interact with each other. Smaller circles might represent individuals, staff, other individual influencers, maybe users in the community. Once we provide these slides, I will also provide examples of what these maps look like so that you all can have them as takeaways. But by visualizing the relationship, the project teams can better understand who to engage with and how to effectively manage the project. Remember, to build buy-in in today's environment, we need to map not just the human influencers, but also the systems and the tools that shape the workflow behavior. So you might ask, who in your team or among your tools can bolster credibility or speed? For example, you might have an algorithm in your grant platform that might signal urgency or priority. That is influence. You should also assess which AI agents are being trusted or ignored, which dashboards or analytics are shaping decision flows. So including these will broaden the influence map, and it'll help sharpen the strategy for securing the real engagement that you'll need for innovation. In cross-functional teams, the most powerful accelerators might not be a person. It might be a well-positioned tool. And you can bring them both together to maximize the impact. So it's important to consider both. So here's an example and a sample of what that influence map might look like. So now that you have your idea, the innovation project, you've maybe mapped out your stakeholders, you understand their influence, and you're ready to go. Well, chances are you will face some resistance. And resistance in leadership isn't a barrier. You should really see it as a diagnostic tool. It's telling us something that is out of alignment. Maybe it's clarity, maybe it's trust. It could be timing or support. The worst thing we can do is bulldoze through it. So at one organization, I was asked to design, it was a federal agency, their first enterprise risk management program. The expectation was crystal clear. Build a governance structure, develop templates, stand up a process to assess risk across the enterprise. Sounds simple enough. And there is a whole playbook written on how to implement an enterprise risk management framework, an actual step-by-step playbook. However, I knew that if I showed up to executive roundtables with binders full of complicated templates and matrices and heat maps, that would be intimidating. It would be pretty wonky and I would lose them in an instant. So instead of launching with a toolkit of templates, I started with a single, simple human question. What keeps you up at night? That question opened doors. Executives leaned in. Instead of compliance language, we talked in real terms. Program performance, reputational risk, missed opportunities, and operational blindsides. I collected these insights, and with my team, we mapped them into categories. And from there, we did leverage the playbook so that we could design a simple agency-specific framework that reflected how the agency actually operated. No overwhelming templates, no one-size-fits-all dashboards, just a shared understanding of where we needed to pay attention and why. Now, that program became a cornerstone for strategic planning and some budget alignment. And it wasn't because it was technically complex. Again, I thrive in that space, given my background, but it was because it was emotionally resonant. And it was noted at the time by the Office of Management and Budget as a leading framework. And it all started with listening, not lecturing. And when you meet resistance with curiosity, you create space for innovation. And that's how you implement reform and innovation that lasts. So when we pause, we allow space for honest reflection instead of reacting impulsively. Asking the right questions helps reveal what lies beneath the resistance. Often it's fear or lack of clarity or prior negative experiences. Then we can connect those concerns to a greater purpose, reinforcing the shared mission. Finally, by equipping our teams with clear tools and support, we transform resistance into momentum. Now, you're not going to win everyone at one time, but if you can get enough of your team moving and start to show some successes and wins, again, even if incremental, that's momentum. So the framework here, the PACE framework, it does help navigate with presence and purpose, right? You pause, you recognize resistance without reacting, ask open-ended questions to explore what's underneath, connect and reaffirm the shared goals and values. And this is something that you might have to iterate on and remind your team and your colleagues about those shared goals and values. And then you equip, you provide support and context so that the innovation and the reform can move forward. A framework like PACE can help leaders respond to resistance, not as opposition, but as valuable insight. And it's designed to turn emotional or logistical pushback into forward movement. So first, perceive what's really going on, what's driving the reaction. Then ask questions and acknowledge what's at stake. Often resistance is a sign that something meaningful is being protected, and that's an important concept to wrap our brains around. Sometimes people aren't resisting because they don't want to move. Sometimes people are resisting because they want to hold close what they feel might already be working or what's familiar. But from there, you want to reconnect everyone to a shared purpose and outline how the change can advance the collective goals. And then, of course, empower action, offer resources, clear next steps, and partnership. The more people feel involved and equipped, the more quickly resistance shifts into alignment. In today's teams, resistance might also be aimed at the technology, especially new AI tools or automated systems that change how work gets done. And here's the key: resistance to AI or automation isn't ignorance, it's intelligence. And you should use that to inform how to move forward. And it often signals valid fears around relevance, around autonomy, or even job security. And the people and leaders most at risk of being replaced aren't being replaced by AI alone. They're being replaced by other people who know how to use the technology. So you can apply PACE here as well, right? Perceive whether the resistance is rooted in trust, transparency, or fear of the unknown. Ask what role people want to play alongside any tools. Connect the use of the tools to mission-aligned benefits, right? Highlight the efficiency, focus, and reach. And if you have any pilot programs or evidence of success, use it. And then equip your teams with the resources to learn, test, and offer input and implementation. When you use resistance as a doorway and not a dead end, you uncover crucial information that builds credibility, reduces friction, and makes reform more resilient. So, as a CFO, I can tell you from experience, budgeting isn't about the spreadsheets. It's not about making the math work. It's not about all of the charts. Budgeting is about telling the truth about what we value and where we're going. And innovation without funding is nothing more than aspiration. So we're going to spend extra time on this section together because budgeting can be fairly complicated. And I know as leaders, you know you need it, and you know you need to get buy-in around the funding you need. But sometimes it's not so easy to make that happen. And while I don't have enough time to go through a more complex and complete budget framework for decision making, I'm going to offer two more simple frameworks that you might be able to apply. You know, and often we do think of budget as a constraint, but I want to challenge that with you today. Use your budget as your innovation accelerator. Because when it's used well, your budget will force focus. It'll force your organization to name priorities. It'll spark trade-offs, and it will give permission to let go of what's no longer serving the organization. In today's reform landscape, budgeting is more than an operational necessity, and I get it. Budget realignment can feel overwhelming at times. So I'm going to walk through in a bit more detail two practical frameworks. Now, again, don't walk into a room and say, we're going to, employ fuel framework. That's a hard to sell. But these are items that you can take and apply that might fit your organization. So first, for those who need clarity and structure, that's the rethink, refocus, and resource. This model can help excel structured high-level conversations. So think of a senior executive decision meeting, right? High-level conversations, and it helps to ensure that your major bucket of dollars reflect the evolving priorities. So you want to rethink what's no longer working or what's no longer worth the investment. You want to refocus on what matters now and how the mission either has evolved or how you expect it to evolve. And then you want to resource it, right? Where do you put the people, the time, and money to drive those results? For more agile and energetic teams, think a leadership team retreat or a team meeting. You might consider the fuel framework. And these are environments where you're needing energy and movement. This framework helps reframe budgeting around momentum and potential. So you want to focus. Where do we need to double down? Unload. So what's distracting or draining the momentum? Elevate what's already working and what deserves a bigger platform. And then leverage the existing resources to maximize. So let's talk a little bit about budget strategy in the age of AI automation, because it does change the conversation a bit. When you reprioritize and elevate, whether it's an AI agent or it's a tech tool or an autonomous machine that's helping streamline operations, make sure you're investing in your people. I can't say that enough. Invest in the people and not just the platform. So this means realigning budgets for staff that work alongside the tools. You want to make sure you're equipping your staff with the training to understand, collaborate with, and here's a sweet spot, to even improve how the tools are used. Your tech should not be something that happens to your teams. Obviously, you want them to co-create with the technology. And so along those lines, when you focus, you want to aim for integration. You want to integrate the tools, right? Don't fund flashy standalone pilots that aren't tied to workflows. Invest in embedding the technology in the day-to-day, where it supports decision-making, where it might flag risks, and where it enables smarter operations. In my seat, I'm often asked about the big wins. That's what people want to hear about. Where were the big wins? Where are the big shifts? Where's the big innovation? But I'll tell you, more than anything, a lot of where the movement came from were those incremental changes in the day-to-day operations that were actually impacting the way that the teams did their work day to day. And so while big is good and big performance innovation matters, don't lose sight of those smaller wins and the incremental progress that needs to be made in order to feed the big reform. So I do want to dive into each framework a bit more. Like I said, we're going to spend a little time here. This helps you maybe understand how to choose which one or which pieces of one to move forward with. So rethink, refocus, resource. This encourages intentional trade-offs, and it helps teams shift from reactive to strategic thinking and supports tough conversations. Right? It could be ideal for budget cycle planning, executive team strategy sessions, as I mentioned before, maybe even mid-year realignment efforts. This can work really well in executive settings and in strategy sessions when you need disciplined clarity to help prioritize. Fuel is ideal for energizing innovation teams, encouraging momentum building decisions, and it's easy to teach and apply in resource constrained environments. This one, the Fuel framework, is really all about momentum, and it's perfect for startups, innovation teams, post-reorg conversations where people need energy and they need some insight and they need a line of sight. And you don't have to pick just one, right? Use the one that fits your organization, or use both to get richer insight. Together, elements of these frameworks provide a holistic toolkit. And whether you're guiding an agency through a realignment or re-energizing a team after a reorg, these tools can turn budget conversations into moments of clarity and transformation. And you want to make sure that your budgeting exercise isn't simply an accounting exercise, right? You need to use your budget as a tool for strategic innovation. And what gets funded gets built. And even if it doesn't get built, at least your team works to build it. And if you want to lead innovation, you have to align your budget with your values and with the future of whatever the organization is building. So in complex environments, clarity is currency. Confusion is expensive, right? Confusion burns through time, it burns through trust, and it burns through capacity. When people don't know what's happening or why, they fill in the blanks with fear, or worse, misinformation. And I've fallen victim to this myself, where I've got the momentum. I've got the momentum with my team, but I failed to bring along everyone else to make sure that there was clarity. And so there is cost in trying to dial back and figure out where we misstepped. And change fails when communication falters. So employing something like a message map, right? One core message, 3 refined, tailored messages that are related to the core message, 3 audiences delivered through 3 different formats. It's a simple way to ensure your message is repeated, reinforced, and responsive. Now, I've used this approach across organizations, even with oversight bodies, because the message that I was delivering internally, whether to my executive colleagues or to our board of directors, or even to external oversight bodies, changed a bit each time to make sure that the message was landing appropriately for that right audience. I saw over and over how tailored communication built trust and eased transitions. Now, I know some of you here are executives or other senior leaders, and you've already led major transformations. You've managed through crises, or you're managing through crises. You've managed through reorganizations and restructurings. So let me offer something a bit deeper for you all. What seasoned leaders like yourselves, I'm sure, know is that complexity isn't solved by more communication. And we hear that a lot, right? Communicate more, 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 and often. Well, complexity is sometimes solved by better orchestrating the communication, right? Your communication strategy needs to act like infrastructure, not announcements. It needs to be timed well in the right formats to the right audiences. Your message might build as you evolve and as things change. And some of the best leaders that I've known have known how to engineer that clarity into every layer of the organization. And that is challenging, but it's definitely something to strive for. So here's what you might consider. Are you sequencing your messages with intention, right? Staff shouldn't hear about a reorg from other people or other offices. Are you segmenting by influence and trust, not just hierarchy? So I talked about before the influence map, right? Who actually moves opinion in the organization? A third item to consider, are you closing the loop? And are you reopening the loop? The best communication builds feedback loops, not just message blasts. And are your leaders cascading meaning and not just content? So sometimes, as executives who are charged with delivering a very big and impactful message, we do need to rely on other leaders throughout the organizations, whether they report directly to us or not, to help drive the message and help to make sure that it gets delivered to the right people. So we need to make sure we're equipping everyone with the context. And in reform environments where innovation is needed, clarity is the competitive advantage. Whoever can be clearer first usually wins. And something like a message map canvas, as shown here, it can help shape a consistent, targeted communication that resonates across diverse audiences. So it's a visual representation of your core messaging, supporting key messages and points, and then any relevant evidence that you can bring, because evidence is so important. Being able to show people, whether it's your colleagues or your teams, what has worked or what there's evidence for working is really important. So rather than broadcasting the same message to everyone, this framework calls for a bit of nuance. Each audience, from frontline teams to executives, they have different concerns, and your messages should reflect that. By pairing the tailored content with the multiple formats, you're able to reinforce your message and close communication loops and reduce confusion. So message mapping can help transform your updates into alignment tools. So remember, one singular core message, your three tailored messages that reflect that message. What do you need people to know? Those are those messages. Your audience, who needs to hear it? And then your formats, right? What's the best way to deliver what needs to be shared? So we'll have to be honest. Some of our best wins, some of our biggest wins never make it to a dashboard. And I love a good dashboard. I'm a former deputy performance improvement officer. Measuring performance and having a dashboard is really important. And even as an executive, right? You need to be able to see what you're measuring so you can act on it. But some of these big wins that really matter as we're moving through innovation and reform, they might not make that dashboard. Like the moment that your team starts solving problems without you. There's one memory I have where I was, spent a couple of years really building a solid leadership team. And there was a major issue that came up in some of the way that we were investing some of our funds. And we had a bit of a misstep, right? The sequencing of funding to investments didn't quite line up, and we overinvested, which was a huge error. Well, once my leadership team came to me with this, they had already gathered themselves to have meetings to discuss how to resolve, understanding where the sequencing was off, and explaining next steps. And that was not measured on a dashboard. But what that was helping me to understand that now we're working cohesively as a team, that we see an issue, we gather the right people, and we work to resolve it. And that was a team dynamic that wasn't readily available in the dashboards that I had. Or also when a meeting ends early because everyone's in alignment. Well, that doesn't make it to a dashboard, but that level of clarity and that level of alignment is important because it's those things when your teams are really working together and they have that synergy. When people are gathered and they're all focused and they have a line of sight, a collective line of sight, those are the things that will help sustain innovation. Those are the things that will help sustain any reform. So success in reform isn't just about the numbers. So while traditional KPIs matter, right, and we all need them, they can sometimes miss the human signals that indicate real sustainable progress. So something like a beyond the metrics dashboard, you can call it a number of things, help to bring those deeper qualitative indicators to the forefront. So you really want to consider that. When I was working through a major financial transformation, we did a lot of great work to monitor the progress we were making to improve processes and systems. And one thing I asked my team for as well was the overall health of the team. I said, I need a way to understand how everyone's doing. How are they doing? Sometimes we innovate with lots of momentum and speed, but we don't often pay attention to the burnout. And that's important. So, morale, decision-making speed, stakeholder confidence can tell you more about momentum sometimes than the charts can around some of the more specific progress that's being made. So by layering the insights though, because you do want to understand both with standard metrics and with some of the more qualitative understanding of how the teams are working, you can gain a more complete picture. Celebrating improvements is also really important, and not just again that this, we've refined this process, or now we do it with fewer steps, or now we've been able to not only reconcile errors, but now we're seeing fewer errors. It's also important to celebrate and recognize improvements in team behavior, trust, clarity, right? Because it's that reinforces the change that you're working toward. So if you only measure what's easy to count, you'll often miss out on some of the things that truly count to make the change sustainable. So something like this isn't a replacement, again, for traditional KPIs, but it's an enhancement. And so it helps to add some of those leading indicators of culture, trust, collaboration, and progress to reveal how well your team is positioned to sustain innovation, not just launch it. The launch is important. And a lot of time we spend a lot of time on the launch. But as executives and senior leaders, once that change is happening, and once you've either launched or moved to launch, it's important to quickly pivot toward what have I done, or if I haven't paid attention to it, what do I do now to sustain this innovation? So dashboards such as this, it helps to answer questions like, are we not only doing the work, but are we becoming the kind of team that can continue to do it well? And are we becoming the kind of team that can sustain the innovation? So just, ask what else you can measure. Speed of decision-making, stakeholder confidence, peer-to-peer referrals, that's huge. It's huge when you have other organizations or other offices within the organization that are out there saying how much either a service or a product that you offered to them helped improve their work. Peer-to-peer referrals is huge. So traditional metrics usually show the activity, but you want to identify with your team metrics that show movement and sustainability. So what does all this mean? Innovation is a leadership habit and not one-time events. It's those moments where when you need to innovate and bring people together, those complex teams, again, humans, machines, to make things happen. It's built through daily choices. It's the meeting you prepare with purpose. It's the tough conversations that you lean into. It's the colleagues you invite instead of talking around when they might not be with the momentum wave that you need to make things happen. And so there are three things that I want to close with and that I hope you all carry forward. Innovation starts with how you show up, and your presence and purpose set the tone, and being very clear about that. And the clear about the roles that you need your team members, again, whether people or tools, what roles they play to help achieve the purpose. And ideas don't always win on merit. More times than not, they will win on momentum and clarity. So consider how you keep the right things moving. And use your budget as an innovation accelerator, not as a blocker, to help your organization prioritize and target funding. Use it to reflect and drive what matters most. So I hope you leave with a clear understanding that innovation today requires leadership that is both emotionally intelligent and AI aware. We are leading complex hybrid teams of people, systems, data, and increasingly machine agents that influence decisions and behaviors. And that requires leadership approach that balances clarity, structure, and flexibility, and insight and curiosity. Like I said, I've had some huge wins, but I've also had some failures, but I've been able to use that to refine how I move forward. And so your role as a leader, as we move forward in this landscape, it isn't just to adopt new tools to do things better or faster. It really is to create conditions where people and machines can work together in a way that's aligned, that's trusted, and mission focused. And that takes a little bit of courage. It takes communication, and it takes intention. So as you go forward, I hope some of this will be things that you can pull on to use in your own organization or your own teams. And I look forward to staying connected. If you have any questions on how to employ any of this, I'm happy to connect with any of you. And I really appreciate you all taking the time to be here today.